to Meet the Candidates, a show that brings you face-to-face with candidates running for federal, state, and local offices. Our Constitution empowers we the people to protect our country's future through the ballot box, a privilege and responsibility that many countries don't have. This sacred privilege gives you, the voter, the power to hire good leaders, while at the same time to fire bad leaders. We have the privilege of living in the greatest country in the world, but it'll only stay that way if we empower good leaders to lead. So this journey, if you'll go with me, will enable us to find out more about each candidate. Where do they stand on things like immigration, domestic as well as international policy? These are some of the questions that we're going to explore on Meet the Candidates. So stay tuned, let's go, get your notepads out, and let's find out who we need to vote for, who is going to protect us and sacrifice for us with the passion that they must have in order to keep America great. I'm Billy Graff, your host. Welcome to Meet the Candidates. Today's guest grew up in the New Caney area. He attended Texas State University on a football scholarship. Then he went on to earn a law degree from Loyola University College of Law. He has served as a commissioned officer in the United States Navy Judge Advocate Corps. He currently practices law in the Woodlands area. He also, while in the Navy, provided legal counsel to the Navy SEAL teams based in Little Creek, Virginia, who deployed as part of a special operations task force in Afghanistan. He lives in the Montgomery County area with his beautiful wife, Jennifer, and they have 3 children. This is Jonathan Hullihan. Welcome to Meet the Candidate.
Thank you, Billy. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, we're so glad you could be here.
Yeah.
Session 1 today, we're going to talk about your life.
Excellent.
We would like to know more about you. We would like to know what your family's like, what your hobbies are like. Tell us who you are.
Okay. So you've already stated I grew up in the New Caney area, so I'm from East Montgomery County.
Okay.
Graduated from New Caney in 1999. My family, Jennifer, she's my college sweetheart. So I met her first year of college at Texas State. She's wonderful. She's been following me around the country. She followed me to law school, which I wouldn't wish on anybody anyway. Because any law student knows or lawyer knows those 3 years are pretty difficult.
Right.
But yeah, that's I didn't just pop out of nowhere. I mean, I'm from East Montgomery County. Okay. Went to Texas State on a scholarship, played football, went to Loyola, joined the Navy. Really from after 9/11 happened, I really wanted to serve my country, and I thought to myself, I could go to a law firm and make money and do all this, but it really wasn't. It wasn't me. I've always been a person of service. Growing up in Montgomery County, it's where I learned the value of a dollar, really understood what a hard day's work means, and really learned the community, the values that are instilled in me today. And that's who I am from a value-based perspective. I have 3 beautiful children. Joseph, he's 12. Reagan, she's 10. And Charlotte, she's 2. So yes, I have a 2-year-old, which is fun because after such a long break, it's pretty interesting getting back into it because, hey, what do you mean this car seat's been discontinued? We can't use the car seat that I've held on to for the last 8 years? No. You mean the crib I've been hauling around the country I can't use anymore? So, yeah, that's been fun. She's a beautiful little girl, and that's. My children, my wife, my family is the light of my life.
Fantastic.
And, that's one of the reasons I'm running for Congress.
Hey, there's no doubt that family is just the heart of America.
It is.
I agree 100%. Well, I look at your life. I've looked at many things that you've accomplished in your life. You've been a student. You've been a naval officer. In fact, you still are with the reserves. You are a practicing attorney. You're a family man. What would you consider to be your most important accomplishment in the area of service to the public?
Well, my first accomplishment as a father and a husband, service to the public. I'm very proud of my military service. I think that if everybody served in some capacity, it doesn't have to be in the military. I mean, really getting that sense of service and serving the community and serving others, that's the highest calling in my mind. Doing things for the community to make other lives better. Those things have really given me a larger appreciation for my family, my children, the broader perspective on the community. So military service is important, but also within that group, when I was in the military, helping, for a while I did legal assistance, and I helped a lot of retirees, a lot of the World War II veterans. I would go to the homes. They had either issues with their powers of attorney or their property or guardianships or whatever.
Right.
I found that part, although it's not the most shiny part of my resume, I really enjoyed helping the older generation of World War II veterans with their legal assistance issues. So with the naval service, being an attorney, using the rule of law to really better people's lives, and to find justice where justice is not always there, that's been very valuable to me. And that's why I went to law school. I really believe in the rule of law and justice.
Oh, great. Well, hearing all that, sounds like you've got a really nice life. Why do you want to be a congressman?
I don't. Who wants to be a member of Congress? Who wants to move to D.C.? I feel like it's an obligation.
Okay.
I really feel like it's an obligation to see what's going on in the country today, the defund the police movements, the socialism creeping into our society, critical race theory at our schools. I mean, we're in a full-on war for what is America. What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to bring up your family? And I look around and I'm concerned with the leadership, nobody in particular, but just the direction of the country. I'm concerned with we're not sending the right people to Washington, D.C. because, I look back to the founders and when we declared our independence, I mean, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Right. And do you think that still is persistent with the political class today? I would argue in most cases it's not. I don't think politicians are willing to pledge their lives, their fortune, or their sacred honor. And that's what it's going to take to take back this country, to get us back on the right track, to have real leadership with bold ideas. I want to be the candidate of ideas. I want to bring real solutions and not just be part of the DC cog and wait for somebody to tell me what to do.
Well, you've got a lot of life experience, a lot of work experience. How do those couple together to really provide for you the essential tools necessary to be a good representative for the people in CD8?
I think just my upbringing and background. I mean, I come from very humble means. Everything I've had in my life, I've had to work for, whether it was an athletic scholarship to pay for college or to put myself through law school. It was never funded. Having that kind of background and hard work and work ethic and understanding the people of this county, and also with my legal background, I've worked on some pretty complex matters of law and policy, whether, I am a naval officer. I'm still a naval officer in the reserves, but really just the background, whether it's legislative proposals or working on operational law. I wasn't particularly a trial attorney. I was for a while. I prosecuted some pretty complex crimes, but really the bread and butter of where I earned my paycheck was with international law, operational law, and really understanding those complex matters of law and policy on the tip of the spear of national security policy and diplomacy. And working through that process, working with the interagency, understanding those issues, understanding the failures, watching the failures, seeing the same thing over and over again, whether it's in Afghanistan. We've trained this many of our partner force and we've created this much white space, and just watching it year after year, it never got better. I knew there had to be a better solution, and I wanted to use my not only background, legal background, but also upbringing in this county to bring something better, some common sense ideas to make change, and really provide a solution.
Thank you. Assuming you're elected, what would you make your number one priority? I guess you could say your passion for why you're running. Number one thing you would like to see done.
Well, I think the passion, the reason I'm running is, and you can encompass so many issues in this, is the rule of law. But the number one issue today, absolutely, is the border crisis. You don't have a nation if you don't have a border. You don't have a sovereign, independent, free United States or Texas if you're allowing illegal aliens to just pour over the border. And what does it mean to be an American citizen? It almost makes it meaningless because the people coming over don't assimilate into our culture because they don't have to learn our history and our culture and our heritage and what it means to respect the flag when they're just allowed to come over the border and not respect our rule of law. So today, the border is the most important issue. I mean, there's so many issues: human trafficking, human smuggling, sex trafficking, fentanyl crisis, great power competition, which gets into foreign issues with terrorism and folks coming over our border unchecked. There's so many issues with the border. So whatever we can do to secure the border with, as a member of Congress, with the power of the purse, you have to use that power of the purse to really pull those strings to get that border secure.
Okay. Thank you. Well, folks, that brings an end to our life segment. And don't go away, because those were the easy questions. We're now going to move into the hard questions, and I want to make sure you don't miss out on the Liberty segment. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the Liberty segment of our show. Jonathan, I want to dig deep now. The life segment is really all about getting to know you a little bit more on a personal level. Now I want to get to know you more on a policy level. And I want the voters to have the same opportunity that I do to really understand where you're coming from. This administration is spending trillions of dollars it just doesn't have. It's creating debt for our children and our grandchildren. I guess my real concern is this. When you're elected, if elected, are you going to be willing to sign off and support bills that create more debt for our people?
I mean, it obviously depends on what the bill is, but philosophically, I think all debt to the government, we need a balanced budget amendment. So we can't spend more than we bring in. So whether it's cutting spending, I don't believe in increasing taxes. I think a smaller government, a more flexible government, and allow the people to keep their money actually helps the economy along. As far as making a pledge to not increase spending, of course, it depends on the issue, but philosophically, I think we have to always look to spend less than we bring in.
Okay.
And I think a balance, like many states in the union, I mean, they have balanced their budgets. They have balanced through amendments to their constitution. I think we need to do that on the federal level.
Okay. 2020 brought into light some really interesting things during the election. And what we saw was questions in relationship to the safety of our election system, ballot challenges, possible ballot harvesting issues. The Democrats, anytime we talk about this particular issue, they really want to call anything related to this more voter suppression concepts. They want to say anything that you want to do to make the ballot box more safe for the voter is voter suppression. Could you give us some thoughts or some of your opinions on voter integrity in our country?
Well, I mean, if you want to just go back to the last election, I mean, I think Republicans in general, conservatives, they don't take the offensive. They're always on the defensive. So if you look at the 2020 election, for example, the Democrats were telegraphing what they were doing. I mean, if you looked at Mark Elias and his liberal law firms, they were going to these districts, they were going to these states, and they were convincing either liberal judges or secretaries of state to change election law. Well, that's unconstitutional. I mean, we know from the Constitution that only the state legislators can actually certify and create the election law. So right there we lost. So that's an example of we should have been more proactive, and we need to always be more proactive. We can't get behind the eight ball. If we're always responding, we're always in a defensive position, we're never going to win because the Democrats are always on the offensive. So that's my thoughts on that. So I absolutely agree. And I mean, we should have one day of elections, and you should show up. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that. If you're elderly or sick or you're military, I've cast many votes overseas. I'm sure you have too.
Oh, I have too. Definitely.
I've filled out those military ballots.
Never missed an election.
Yeah. So there's obviously exceptions to that, but we need to secure our elections. We can't have conditions that are conducive to fraud. And whether that's voter ID, which is very important. I mean, if you have to have an ID to drive a car, drink a beer, or adult in other ways, you should have to have an ID to vote, period. Should be no question.
Okay.
We should, look, absentee ballot, I get it, but like these weeks and weeks of elections, I mean, it just creates a condition that it's conducive to fraud. And we should always, all Americans, this should be a bipartisan issue. Like we should not allow our elections to have any instance of fraud. There's always going to be fraud, and Democrats have cheated for 40 years. But I think now it's just in our face. They're just rubbing it in, and they're using the force of law. They're using what we call lawfare to go to liberal judges, forum shop, go to secretaries of state that are willing to turn a blind eye. And it's time we fight that. It's time we go on the offensive, and not after the election, before the election. We need to look and see where are these Democrats moving? Where are the Mark Eliases of the world moving their resources and assets? What are they wargaming? And then we need to counter that, and we need to counter that effectively. And we need to have the right kind of. It doesn't take a legal mind, but it helps to have a legal mind to fight these liberal Ivy League, trust fund baby lawyers that want to virtue signal through their law firms and to go and change election law unconstitutionally. I may add.
Yeah. Let's just to make it really clean, crisp, and to the point. What do you think the number one thing we can do to protect the sanctity of the ballot?
I think have 1 day of elections.
Okay.
Obviously, with those exceptions, if you need mail-in ballot, if you need mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, but I think shortening the periods, voter ID, in-person voting, throw more infrastructure at it, throw more money. If it takes more money to have more secure elections and you need to open more sites, then that's what we need to do. And it's an investment in our future, because if we don't do that and the Democrats or anybody else is allowed to cheat, then you're just throwing your future away in other ways.
Okay. Well, let's get on the hottest topic out there today. Okay. And let's just hang out for a little while. I want to talk about the border. I want you to tell us, one, what do you see to be the big problem, or if there is, even if there may not be a problem. You tell me if there's a problem, and then I want to go into some ideas of policy that you would like to be a part of as a congressman.
Okay. Well, the biggest issue, obviously, is that they're not enforcing the border. I've been to the border. I've had my foot on the Rio Grande. I've watched family units cross. I've watched our Border Patrol overwhelmed. I've watched at the time, this was during the July 4th weekend, I've watched our National Guard troops not repel an invasion in our country. So to answer your question, the border is a huge crisis. It's the number one issue. We have to shut down the border. We have to repel the invasion. I don't know how we got to a point where we just welcome everybody. The biggest threat, in my opinion, is the cartels. They're running the border. We are not running the border. The cartels are running the border. So what do we do about that, right? We have to, President Trump, he had the Remain in Mexico policy. It was working. People could claim asylum at the embassy or other ports of entry. Since we've removed that policy, what do you have? The cartels control the ports of entry. The cartels control where you can claim asylum. So what does that mean? You just cross the border anywhere and claim asylum. Why do they want these groups of people crossing the border? Number one, they can make a lot of money off of it. If you're a Mexican citizen, I think it's $4,000 or $5,000 they're charging. If you're some other South American citizen, it's $6,000 or $8,000. The last time I saw the open source intel on it. If you're Iranian or Chinese, it goes up to $10,000. So because we've removed the Remain in Mexico policy and we allow these units to come across, family units, we're enabling the cartels to make millions of dollars off human smuggling, human trafficking, but more importantly, equally important, just the illegal invasion. I met the angel moms down on the border, Mariam Mendoza, and those types. We've lost American citizens. Wow. We've had American citizens killed by illegal aliens. And everybody should say the term illegal aliens, because under the U.S. Code, under 8 U.S.C. and Title 18 U.S.C., they're illegal aliens. Right. And they're coming across our border, and American citizens may die, whether it's a DUI or a murder or manslaughter or just negligence. They shouldn't have been here in the first place. Right. So we have a duty and a responsibility to protect American citizens and put the rights of American citizens above the rights of non-citizens. So how would we fight the cartels? you have to take control of your border. We can't allow them to control it. You have to open up those ports of entry by pressuring Mexico and other South American countries. The second thing you can do under Title VIII, and I don't want to get into too many technical details, but under Title VIII, you are allowed to declare certain organizations as
terrorist organizations.
Yeah, so foreign terrorist organizations, for FTOs. If we do that, that would open up some tools, some money, some funding, some prosecution to prosecute anybody supporting the cartels under a material support to terrorism statute. That could have some teeth because you can put people away for a long time.
Right.
And I'm not talking about just the coyotes. I'm talking about the runners on our side, anybody that puts them in a safe house. That's material support. So there's some tools in our toolkit we can use right now. And then we can partner with Mexico under that same kind of logic, under an FTO designation, and do some military training, help their special forces to fight the cartels in Mexico.
Well, let me ask you this question real quick. And it's going to seem like a dumb question, but I think it's an important question to understand. Who writes and passes laws in the United States of America?
The Congress writes and passes laws in the United States of America.
Should the President of the United States follow the laws of the United States?
Absolutely.
When he doesn't, what value do you think and what authority do you believe a state would have in reference to this exact topic? Because that is a big question, federal authority versus state, local authority in relationship to the border. I'd really like to kind of get your take on what you feel like a state would have as far as authority, legal authority, and with the 10th Amendment, where does that play into having any authority at all?
Well, I mean, the Constitution is clear, and it's been so warped over the years and we're so far, and we've deviated so far from what the founders intended. But the 10th Amendment allows for those powers not reserved to the federal government, it's to the states or the people. So those powers, those that are specifically delegated to the federal government, they have a duty and responsibility under the Constitution to enforce those. For example, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees a Republican form of government, but also guarantees the federal government will assist the states in repel invasions. They're not doing that. So I think under the Constitution, especially under the 10th Amendment, if you're talking about the federal government not fulfilling those specific duties that are delegated to them or reserved for them under the Constitution, I think the states have a duty and a responsibility to fill those roles. So we saw Governor Abbott, he's enforcing immigration law on the border, or attempting to, or he has attempted to in some manner, and the state and the DOJ is suing them, suing the state of Texas. It's insane. Like, if the federal government has abdicated their duties and responsibilities, the states have a responsibility under the Constitution to step in.
Right. If the federal government doesn't do it, and if the state doesn't do it, then who's going to do it?
I mean, the people. I mean, the people have to stand up and do it. And that's a sticky situation because going against the government, I mean, as far as, we've seen groups and militias try and go down to the border and they just arrest them.
Right.
But we have to enforce immigration law. Hopefully it goes to the states and it doesn't get to a lawless situation. Because at the end of the day, our loyalties lie with the Constitution, and our responsibilities lie with the Constitution. And we have to, in every manner we can, ensure the rule of law is being followed.
Okay. I think that's a great conversation. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Too often, and I think you've seen this, and I think this is one of the reasons so many great patriots are stepping up and offering their services to this position on behalf of the people of this area. Too many times, once elected, too many people get eaten up by the DC monster, I call it. The DC, we use the word swamp, but I like sewer, whatever terminology we might want to use. They get so focused on getting reelected, and they begin over time to forget about serving the very people that elected them to be there. So what I'd like to know are your thoughts on term limits.
Oh, I 100% agree with term limits. As a matter of fact, early on, it was one of my biggest passions. I signed the term limits pledge So I believe that there should be a constitutional amendment, which will require, obviously, supermajority in the House and Senate, 2/3. So a constitutional amendment of 3 terms for members of Congress, which would be 6 years, and 2 terms for the Senate, which would be 12 years. I think that's very important. We have to remove the political class from the equation. We have to get it back to the people, the power back to the people. And by removing them through a constitutional amendment, I think that's very important. Now, that said, as far as self-limiting, I think it's important. I wouldn't, anybody that's willing to sign off on term limits, I don't think anybody should self-limit until we have enough to actually get a constitutional amendment. Otherwise, you're going to be in this do loop where you never get enough. Several members, Ted Cruz, I don't know him offhand, but we're getting there. We're getting to enough elected representatives where eventually we're going to have that number. I mean, we're going to have to win over more Democrat seats.
So do you think it's a true viable conversation in the future then?
I hope so. I mean, otherwise I'm losing faith in everything I believe in. We just have to wake up the people to see this. Like, I mean, look, I'm not a politician. I'm a naval officer. I'm an attorney. I'm a father. I'm a dad. But we have to change the conversation. We have to get the power back to we, the people. And if that means term limits, we have to push for term limits at every turn. We have to hold these people accountable. And we should elect people that only agree to term limits.
That would be an interesting thing.
I mean, that should be the standard. If you don't agree to term limits, they shouldn't get support, period. Because if we get enough of us in there, then we're actually going to make a change. We're going to get a constitutional amendment.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you could always do a convention of states for that, but I mean, I've been in the convention of states as well. But I think the better route, the more secure route, would be to get a constitutional amendment through that supermajority.
Okay. Good. So let's move to another topic.
Okay.
Education. The future of our country lies in the hands of those who are being educated today. Our future leaders are in the schools across our country today. What role do you feel like the federal government should have in the education of our students, our future leaders, from really first grade to 12th grade?
Well, if I wanted to take a strict interpretation of the Constitution, I would say really no role. However, over the years, obviously through the executive branch, there's a Department of Education, and then Congress has exercised the power of the purse to give block grants. I think that the federal government, if they're going to fund through the Congress, through the executive branch, through the Department of Education, as a member of Congress, we should tie strings to that money. We should ensure there's no critical race theory in it. There's no neo-Marxist propaganda. Because at the end of the day, all this critical race theory, 1619 project, that's all intentional. That's to destroy the fabric of this country. That's to put Americans into tribes. If we're all fighting with each other and we're in different race groups or ethnic groups, we're not thinking as Americans. We're not e pluribus unum. We're not one. We're only fighting in factions. And that's what the Democrats want. That's what the liberals want. They want us to fight because that's how they keep their power. And the role of the federal government should be, if needed, I mean, certainly there's states that need federal money. We have to tie strings to that money, just like we do with highway funds. We have to tie strings to it, make sure there's no critical race theory, there's no propaganda, there's no 1619 project. All of those things should be in those federal appropriations to make sure when it gets to the state, and if they violate that at the state level, if a school board wants to make that decision to, hey, we think critical race theory is great, and everybody in that local jurisdiction votes for those school board members, fine. You don't get federal money, and then we take that money away, and you watch them remove that from the curriculum. That's one way I think the federal government can have a role in education.
Okay, interesting approach. Well, you're a family man. You got some beautiful children. I've seen pictures. I looked them up this morning.
Okay.
When I woke up, I said, I got to look at this family. And you have beautiful kids.
Thank you.
Beautiful wife. What are your thoughts and opinions on abortion in America?
I'm a very strong pro-life candidate. I think the right to life begins at conception, and I would support any legislation that either defunds any kind of abortion, defunds any kind of appropriation that goes towards Planned Parenthood. Having 3 children, okay, so don't get me started on this, but
Already did.
just having a baby, especially, I mean, it's such a beautiful thing, and I just can't imagine terminating a life. I mean, there's other options out there that people can do, whether it's adoption, foster care, whatever. Like we can't, I mean, they're human beings from conception and they're God's children and we should treat them like that. Okay. And I just don't understand how anybody could believe in that.
Thank you for your passion. Bill, my partner here at MCP Live, loves to pay taxes, and he's hoping that we get to pay more taxes over the next few years. Of course, that's all in jest. I don't know anybody in my world that really enjoys paying taxes. My real question would be, what do you think about tax reform? And do you think there is something that can be done or not? What's your thought?
Well, are you talking about the federal level or the state level? Well, tax in general, in my opinion, is theft. There has to be some level of tax, obviously, whether it's a flat tax or sales tax or some kind of tax to pay for essential services. Right? But I think in general, the government, politicians just see that as their piggy bank they can rob. And not only tax, but your money, that represents your time. And we only have an infinite amount of time on this earth to spend with our family. And you have to work to pay the government. If you think about how much time, if let's say you're at a 30% tax rate, then 30% of your time that you spent on this earth is to pay for the government. Right. So I think all forms of tax reform, lowering tax is good. And I think cutting spending, I mean, government is bloated. And that's one thing the Republicans have gotten away from in the last few years. I tried to answer this earlier, like there is some necessary spending, but right now, what do we see? We see now hiring signs everywhere we go. And we see the federal government continuing to send out stimulus and unemployment checks. And there are legitimate people that may need assistance. But if you continue to dole out the federal dollars and incentivize people to stay home, you're only hurting small businesses. And what's going to happen if this continues, maybe it's intentional policy, I'm starting to believe it is, by the time those employers or when the money runs out for the folks that are sitting at home, those small businesses that can't hire people are going to be closed. And they're not going to have jobs to go back to. So in my heart, I really believe that this is intentional policy to create another welfare generation where people will be dependent on the government. And if you're dependent on the government, who are you going to vote for? The people giving you the money. So I think this is all intentional policy. They want to continue to allow people to be stuck on the government dollar. And guess what? We're paying for that. We're raising taxes. We're actually not, though. Look at the debt. I just pulled the inflation numbers yesterday. This year, it's the highest inflation in almost, I think it was 2008. It's the highest amount of inflation. It's gone up across the board 5.4%. So what I would ask people, has your paycheck gone up 5.4%? So all these dollars that we're borrowing and adding to the national debt, it's just creating more inflation and more debt. And it's creating a situation where you're falling further and further behind. And the small businesses are falling further and further behind. And they can't find employees. They have to cut their costs. They have to cut their employee hours just to make a profit margin. And it all starts with the government spending and the government tax policy.
Wow. Well, I wish I could sit here for another 20 minutes and talk with you about that. Maybe some other time we'll be able to just talk about tax,
I've got other issues.
Tax issues.
Property, I really hate property tax issues. That's another topic. That's a state issue, but I think it's also a federal responsibility in some way.
All right. Well, folks, that brings an end to what I call the Liberty section. And we're going to move here in a minute after this break to the Hope segment. The Hope segment is a unique thing that we're doing on this show that I think will really empower you as a voter to understand who these candidates are. So don't go away. We're going to be right back with the Hope segment. Well, welcome back to my favorite section, the Hope section. In this section, we give the candidates an opportunity to tell you exactly why they think they're worthy of your vote and what they're going to do for you. And this gives them an opportunity to put hope back into your heart, because I personally believe that America is still the greatest place to live in this world. And America is not done for, but people that we hire by electing, they must be people who have some approach to the idea of what makes America what America is. So here's my great question today, Jonathan. My favorite question of the whole show. How will you, once elected, bring hope and a future to the very people that you are representing?
I think step one is not to get disengaged or too far away from the district. Don't get too far away from the people. Not get drunk on power, drunk on fame, whatever you want to call it. When folks go to DC, they just seem to get sucked up into this world. My entire drive to do this is to represent the people and to really just help fix what's going on. I mean, I agree with you in a lot of ways. The nation's not done, but we're wounded. What the founders envisioned, we're so far from that, and we see the federal government overreach in our states. And just staying connected to the people and staying true to your integrity and your character, and making sure you're making decisions for the right reason, for the people, and to be candid for the people, to be available for the people. When you're elected to Congress, you should be accessible to the state representatives, the state senators, the people at all times, to be responsive to their needs, and to make sure that you are not getting sucked into that DC power machine. And I think that will bring hope. And results will bring hope.
Okay.
Not going to DC to wait around for a year for somebody to tell me what to do, but to lead, to sponsor legislation, to use whatever media I can use to talk about the issues that are important to the people, and to be candid, to not tell people what they want to hear or go back to talking points, but really lead and talk about the important issues of the day. I mean, there's a flood mitigation. There's so many issues in this district that need to be addressed. Whether it's flood mitigation of Lake Conroe, or illegal immigration, or schools, or overcrowding, or defunding the police. There's so many issues that you could just start and get after it, and that will bring hope. Results will bring hope.
Well, often many first-term candidates become elected. They become our representative, and they have there's different approaches to what you do in that first year. One, what is your approach going to be when elected or if elected? And two, what will be your three biggest priorities, if you have any, for that first term?
To answer your first question, I think there's two types of members of Congress, in my opinion. There are those that want to go to DC and fundraise and get that key committee position that they work for years and years, and they put in their time and they sit in the back. And eventually, if they follow all the leadership, they'll get that position. Or you could be a firebrand. And I choose firebrand. I choose to go up there and use my position to pressure, introduce legislation. Yeah, maybe it doesn't get through committee, but then I'll go on TV and talk about why it's not going through committee. That's the kind of member of Congress I want to be. I want to be a firebrand. I want to be somebody that represents the people. I want to lead.
Okay.
And then second part of your question, three top priorities. Again, I say rule of law because it's so encompassing, but I think the border has to be addressed. Censorship has to be addressed. Why in the world are there members of Congress still taking money from Google and Facebook and on both sides? Why are they taking money from the very vehicle that is censoring Americans? The First Amendment is our most precious amendment we have, because it allows us to debate and talk about issues, and it protects us for religious freedom. And you don't want to get to that Second Amendment if the First Amendment is not upheld. Because when I say Second Amendment, I mean we don't want violence. Nobody's advocating for violence, but that's why the First Amendment is there, and that's why the Second Amendment is there to protect the other ones.
Right.
So I think censorship of social media is very dangerous. I think Section 230 of the Public Decency Act should be revoked. I think that all these social media companies should be immediately held liable as a publisher for anything that's happened, which should be the case if the Public Decency Act exception wasn't there, Section 230, but also bust them up, do some trust busting. Look, I think a deregulated environment is best. I think it's better for small business. It's better for employees. It's better for families. But in this situation, we need to regulate. We need to bust them up, and we need to bust them up hard. We can't allow the social media companies, Facebook, Google, all these companies to really drive the conversation to censor Americans. That's what they do in China. That's what they do in these totalitarian Marxist communist states. And it's un-American, and that should be addressed immediately. The third issue, I think any right to life issue, any defunding Planned Parenthood, funding, making sure that right to life legislation is strong. I'll sponsor any legislation. I'll stand by it. It's a very important issue to me. But those are three of the top issues. I think the border, the censorship, and really right to life. It's up there, but just the socialism too, just the creeping in through our systems of government, the critical race theory. I think that's very important because it really devolves what it means to be an American.
Okay. Well, every show, we like to end our show with something very unique. We like to give the candidates a 2-minute window where they can tell you whatever they think you need to know. They can sell you on their candidacy based on their heart, their passion, their dreams, and their policy beliefs. So, Jonathan, this is your 2-minute window. The camera is yours.
I just want to say to all the people out there, I'm running for Congress for the right reason. I had a great career going in the military. I was 13 years of active duty as a Navy JAG, and I just saw what was going on, and I just felt like I could do more. I felt like I could get back home to where I was raised. Again, that goes to I didn't just get plucked out of the sky. I wasn't recruited by some, deep state monster. I really wanted to come back to my roots. I wanted to raise my kids here, and I wanted to serve the people. I want to run for Congress for the right reasons. In my opinion, there's a lack of leadership in a lot of circles, and it's going to take a firebrand to go in there and shake things up and do the right thing and make the right decisions. And we have to get this country back on track. That's what it's going to take. That's why I would be honored that you offer your support to me and vote for me for this congressional seat. We have to send the right people to Congress, people with policy, legal expertise, and just want to do the right thing and serve the people. Want to serve the people to protect your lives, protect your children's lives, and really continue the traditions of this great experiment of our constitutional republic. And we are a Christian nation, and certain things that we have to continue, which is our republic, our Republican form of government, our flag, our respect for our history and our traditions. Those things must continue, and you have to send the right people to do it. And I would ask you to go to my website to learn more, hullihanfortexas.com, and you can read more about me, see my policy perspectives, see my positions, go to my Facebook page, and there's many speeches on there. There's many policy positions I've taken. And I think once you get to know me, I think you'll like me. And I think once the field shapes up and there's some debates, and I think it'll really separate the pretenders from the contenders. And I wish and I hope that you would support me. And thank you, Billy, for having me on the show.
Jonathan, it's just been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
We learned a lot.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for our show this week, guys. Thank you so much for being here with Meet the Candidates, another great candidate. Next week, we'll have another candidate doing the same thing. So don't miss a show because you need to learn everything you can about every candidate. We want our electorate, we want our voters to be educated in the policy beliefs of every candidate so that you can make your best decision on behalf of your family. So we'll see you next time right here on Meet the Candidates. I'm Billy Graff, your host. Have a great day.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and ownership of MCPLive.tv.